Welcome to the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer.
And I'm Michelle Brigman.
And this is the Hard Won Wisdom Podcast. This week, we're going to talk about that subject none of us wants to talk about. Money. God, women hate talking about money. That's a stereotype, but it's kind of true. At least most women that I know. Our guest today is Brandy Baxter, who has a doctorate in strategic leadership with an emphasis in foresight, but she calls herself a financial futurist, which means she watches trends, then tells her clients, do this. No, do that. No, wait, do this instead. So she is going to help us figure out what it is that gives us such a problem talking about it and help us get our hands around it and figure what we should do next. So, Brandy, welcome.
Thank you for having me, ladies. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you because this is something that used to be a problem of mine. Fortunately, it's not as bad as it was, but I have some people in my life who are so terrified of the topic of money that in the last, from beginning of COVID to now, has been unable to have a conversation with her financial advisor because it's so terrifying.
Wow.
And these have been really important years where that communication is really important. So I've always thought, I need to write a book called Women in Money, but maybe you need to write it. So what's the deal? Why do we have this problem?
I kind of already wrote that book, but we'll talk about that later. Honestly, Fawn, I think a lot of it has to do with, despite all the strides we've made as women in society and in culture, we are still very much intimidated by the subject. We're on opposite ends of the spectrum. We're either afraid of it because we've never had it growing up, and so there's an intimidation factor there, or we have more than our friends, and so we're a little embarrassed and we don't want to disrupt the status quo, and so we choose not to talk about it there. Very few of us are somewhere in the middle where we have a healthy relationship with not only money, but with those in our social circles around money.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I had this issue before, and I remember saying to someone that I had a fear, and this was 20 years ago, that I was going to wind up old, sick, broke, and alone. Actually, I didn't say it to someone. I said it to my couples counselor. and she looked at me and said, "Why are you telling yourself that story?" And I just thought, what story? And so I had just interviewed Dr. Christian Northrup, who was the author of this really famous book on women in menopause, or I can't remember the name of it, but it was a big deal. And she had gotten a divorce and had 2 kids, was a single parent, and was really concerned about her finances. And she told the story about how she would get on the treadmill with these Susie Orman tapes. And that was how she figured out what she was going to do to keep herself financially viable. So after the couples counselor said, "Why are you telling yourself that story?" I got myself some Susie Orman tapes. And then I started investing in real estate. And then I stopped worrying about being old, sick, broke, and alone. With a caveat, which we've talked to you about, until now, because our money is worth nothing anymore. And it's kind of a scary time. So why do we tell ourselves these stories, and how can we rewrite them short of everybody ordering Susie Orman tapes?
Oh my gosh, you're making me chuckle with the Susie Orman tapes. Although early in my career, I read a lot of Susie Orman books, so there's definitely an affinity there. I think a lot of times that we tell ourselves these stories because we look around at our environment and we don't see women who are accessible to us who are living a different story. And so when you look at your friends and they're not talking about money, and you later learn about someone who is going through a financial trouble and they only talk about the trouble. We rarely talk about the pathway to success, especially financial success. We tend to shout it from the rooftops when we're experiencing trouble because either we need the support or at that point we've just thrown all caution to the wind and we don't care who knows what we're going through. But I think a lot of times when we are looking around our environment, we don't see pathways to success when it comes to personal finance. Additionally, we as caregivers, most women tend to have that nurture caregiver strain in their personality. We tend to be risk averse. And so we're looking for the safe, sure, reliable solution. And oftentimes financial success comes with a lot of risk. And when women are not prone to be risk takers, they tend to lean into a narrative that says, this is the safe, this is the sure, this is the reliable path to take. And unfortunately, in an environment that's high in inflation and high with interest and all of those factors working against us, safe, sure, and reliable is the pathway to stagnation. And so we have this story in our mind that really is limiting us from accomplishing greater things.
You know, Michelle, when you prepped with Brandy, you had a good discussion on, you know, lack versus abundance. And I think that's probably tied into a lot of it. What made you bring that up, Michelle?
Oh, when I was talking with Michelle, yeah. So, you know, my personal story, my mom was a single mom, and we just saw a lot of things growing up that my children today don't experience. And I think the scarcity mindset of I'm not going to ever have enough can cause an individual, especially a woman, to feel that she has to hang on to everything that she has because she doesn't know where the next thing is coming from. And also, if you've grown up in an environment where you did not have enough, you have no idea how to imagine more. It's almost like a muscle that never got exercised. And so when women grow up in environments where either the male figure managed all of the money and kept everything under a tight grip, or when they grew up in an environment where their parents or their mother specifically didn't really make the conversation around finances an open conversation, she may have this narrative that says money is never going to be around. I will never have enough. And as a result, she inadvertently pushes herself into an environment where she doesn't even pursue more because she can't comprehend what more would look like. Conversely, my children, they don't have that problem. They think money grows on trees. They think that these little plastic cards are some unlimited access to resources. And as a result, I worry about them because they're going to have a rude awakening when they realize work plus money is what brings about all of these things that they now get to enjoy. And so the narrative, I think, as our generation of women, we have to be careful that we're not swinging the pendulum too far on the opposite end, where we're raising up a generation of women that have no value for money. They just think that it's such a disposable commodity that they treat it very carelessly.
So I want to dig into something that's happening, I know, with my peer group, what I've seen over the last year or so, specifically, you know, women that have progressed in their career and often the breadwinner. Okay. So this is what I observe and certainly what I have experienced. Grew up where, like you said, traditional roles in the home. My mother certainly was not the primary breadwinner. She did have a job, and then she had periods of time where she didn't have a job, and she was truly just the homemaker, housewife. So I come into the picture, and money wasn't talked about, right? So I grow up, I'm working, I become more and more successful. I become the primary breadwinner, but all the control is sitting with my husband.
Man.
All the control. And I'm also taught, like, good Christian girl, you're submissive and subservient to your husband. And I know, you know, Brandy, you have a very strong faith-based background, and that shows up in a lot of the work you do. And so it becomes this sort of, push and pull, because I want to be the good girl, but I've given up all my power. And then as soon as, if things are not healthy in the relationship, you as the breadwinner have no room to stand on, right? Like you are at their mercy with money. Like I've had my bank accounts emptied out. I've had, I didn't have a checkbook. Like I've been in relationships where that was the world I lived in. So for a woman now that has progressed in their career, they're getting more and more ownership and responsibility. And this is that place in their life where they are behaving, it's out of alignment. How do we break that? And how do we start to kind of unravel that?
That's a great question. So first, let me address this whole Christian thing. Get you a good Bible teaching church, because submission does not mean subservience. And to your point, Michelle, I do not ascribe to any doctrine or theology that tells a woman that she needs to give up all control of all things. In fact, in our very own household, my husband will often tell the story of how when we married, we had to identify strengths and weaknesses. And my strength is the managing of the money. And so he's almost the exact opposite of what we would expect, because he's like, I don't know how much money we have. I don't know what our investments are. All I know is my wife says this is how much I can spend. And so personally, that is not a model that I think good theological teaching would support, having a woman subscribe to everything and giving all the way the power. But that's a personal comment. Related to how do you manage mid-career and you're in that kind of dynamic, I think that it really requires going back to risk. You have to be unashamed and you have to be relentless in getting education. I'm of that generation where we had the catchphrase, knowledge is power. And I totally live by that. And so even for me to be in this space, it started when my husband and we married. I brought a little molehill of debt. He brought a molehill of debt, and we had a mountain of debt, and no one knew what to do with it. And so I voraciously consumed all the information that I could until I found that I really enjoyed it. And then I started telling other people about it. But most women, we will pursue our careers. We will build our professions. We will go hard after those things. And yet when it comes to money, we tend to shrink back like, well, especially if you're affluent, you're like, oh, well, it's coming in. It's regular. I'm making plenty of it. And we forget that even though it's coming in right now, you still need to understand, how does money move in and out of your life? Go on, go.
I'm dying because, so I used to be an investigative reporter.
Oh, okay.
And years ago, there was a police officer who made himself vanish on the job. There was a massive manhunt for 2 weeks. And while he's gone, it looked like he'd been abducted by someone who tried to kill him and all this stuff. But then it comes out he'd been going to all these little titty bars and that he was on the verge of bankruptcy and he had all this debt, and the wife didn't know any of this, right? And the wife didn't know any of this. And so another reporter did the story on the fact that he had 30 mistresses. 30.
Wow.
And then I did something on the finances, and she called me screaming on the phone. How dare you do this? Why would you do this? And I thought, I want this woman's story. I'm not going to call her back on the phone because she's just going to yell at me and hang up. So I go to her house, and she screamed and yelled at me, and she balled up the paper and threw it at me. And I just looked at her and I said, how could you not know that? With the finances? And she had no clue. And then a couple of weeks later, me, judgmental me, had a situation where my bank account got cleaned out. And I realized I didn't know what was going on either. And that here I am, she was someone who she wasn't working. She was taking care of the kids, and that could be an excuse. Here is an investigative reporter that people literally would run to get away from, who had no idea what I was doing. So, why do we get in a situation like that? And basically, what are the basic things we need to do to make sure that doesn't happen to us?
Well, I think the fundamental situation you both dealt with is as humans, we naturally want to trust. And so I lean into first give yourself the grace and the space to forgive yourself for being a victim. It's not anything that either one of you could have done differently. I believe bad people are going to do bad things if that's what they're set to do. And so the first thing is that the fact that someone cleaned out your bank account, they violated your trust. So forgive yourself for that, allowing that harm and hurt to consume you and make you feel responsible. But secondly, I think it comes down to conversation. So when I'm working with my clients, my typical client is dual income couples. And when I'm working with clients, I encourage them to have a money date. And so this is the time where you agree on the calendar, just like you would go out for dinner and a movie. This is the time when we agree to sit and talk about the money. It's not a stressful time. Plan it out, make it fun, do it in an environment that's not toxic. So if the dining room table was going to be toxic, talk about money at the pizza place. Just do it somewhere where you can be in a place where you don't feel pressure. The more often we can have the money talks and understand what's going on, I think that's the first thing. Just not being afraid to have the conversation. The second thing is you need to have a place for every dollar. Even if you're making a lot of money, you should know where every dollar goes. I used to tell clients, if money is like children, if you don't tell it where to go, it will go wherever it wants to. And so even if you feel like, well, all my bills are paid and this, that, and the other, you should still know where every dollar is going. Even if that means you as the woman, you're putting it in your own savings account. Even if that means you as the woman, you're putting it in your own investment account. Even if that means sitting down with your HR rep and saying, what in the heck is this 401k and why does it matter? And then getting on the phone and saying, hello, financial advisor, I need information first. Don't rush and feel like you have to work with the first person that your employer refers you to. I would ask around for my friends, who is someone that they trust as a financial advisor, who's giving good advice that has turned a result for them. Because everyone can give advice, but I wanted advice that's going to turn a result, a positive result. So start leaning into the conversations and educating yourself on the bare basics. Start with, where is every dollar going? Simple as that. And then having a plan every month. At the end of the month, have a plan. This is where I want my money to go. My personal philosophy is a budget is nothing more than guidelines for where every dollar needs to go. I'm telling my money where to go versus my money telling me where it went. And that's how many of us live. We look at the statement at the end of the month, we look at the credit card statement, and our money is telling us where it went. Versus on the flip side, I want to tell my money where to go. So at the beginning of every pay period, you're going to pay my mortgage. You're going to pay my car payment. You're going to fund my future by going to the investment account, right? It's as simple as that. You don't need any fancy formulas. You don't need any rules. You just need to have a basic understanding. Where is my money going? And I'm telling it where to go.
That's immediately so much more empowering, isn't it?
Yeah. And something equally important for the people listening is that a lot of women are either single parents or just unmarried. So since they don't have anybody to go on a money date with, what do they need to do?
Oh, you can go on a money date with yourself.
I'm going to the finest restaurant.
Yes, go to the finest restaurant. No, but in all seriousness, I think the more intentionality we put around money, the less mysterious it becomes. We have allowed social media, we have allowed mainstream media, we have allowed marketing and consumerism to tell us a narrative about money and how our relationship with money should be. And I say you shut out the noise and you get really intentional with what is it that you want to do, and you look for the resources that help you and support you in doing that. So if you feel intimidated about money, one of the things I'm starting to do recently is working with women in small groups. Maybe you need an accountability partner. Maybe you need a team of women moving in the same direction that you're moving in. So you and a group of girlfriends get together. You don't even have to share your information, but be in the same space with a group of people who are all looking at their bank accounts, who are all looking at their credit cards. You don't have to tell me what's on your credit card, but I know you're looking at your credit card. You know I'm looking at mine, and that gives me comfort. That gives me support. That gives me a network of people that I can say, oh, this is not what I expected. I'm moving forward with a team of people that can help me.
Well, so I want to stop on this one because I love this idea because, going back a little bit to the story I was talking about earlier, once you get to a point of a certain level of success, everybody assumes I got promoted to a certain level. Friday, I didn't know what the hell I was doing with money, but boy, after that promotion, Monday, I suddenly have been enlightened and I know everything. So now it's even harder to raise your hand and go, oh, I really need some help right here, unless there's a major life event like a divorce or a death or some sickness, something that forces your hand to go to it. So I love this idea of being able to pull together a small group of people in your same place. I mean, and that's even for those listening that work for different companies, wouldn't that be a great benefit to offer employees, like based on certain levels they're at, particularly the women employees, that you can pull in and have this as a safe private area for them to connect? Because this is hard, and it gets harder the more successful you become.
100%. 100%, Michelle. Yes. The more successful you are, the more people expect you to have it all together. And there's this other phenomenon that frustrates me. And I'm a little anti-consumerism, if you haven't noticed. But there's this phenomenon that the every promotion, I'm supposed to level up my lifestyle. And so we as women, we get caught up in designer handbags and shoes and hair and nail and all the things, as if on Friday when I was shopping at Target, now all of a sudden I've got a promotion, I need to shop at Nordstrom's. What in the world happened in who I was at the core essence of my being? Not a single thing. But consumerism and marketing tells us, oh, you're at a certain status, so you must look a certain way. But I will promise you, wealthy people do not look like wealthy people, because wealth relates itself to access to resources. And so I don't need to spend my money on things that will diminish in their value over the years, because I'm looking to build something that will last for generations. And a handbag, please forgive me, will not make it for generations.
Amen.
The best advice I ever got, and it's contrary to what everybody says, was pay off the house and have no debt. I have no debt, not a dime. Well, I do. I pay off the credit card at the end of the month and get my miles, but that's
not debt.
Yeah, that's not debt. And that, especially being self-employed, gave me so much freedom because, sometimes you have a good year, sometimes you have a bad year. But I figure, if things get bad at the end, I'm going to get a bunch of credit cards and then just die like way in the hole because there's nothing in there. But, another thing I thought was interesting that we learned, but we didn't really use that lesson, was how during the lockdown, during COVID, think of how much money we saved. We weren't going to restaurants. We had that one tank of gas that lasted like
for like 2 weeks,
like a year, right?
A year.
It was just, we had, and then it was kind of magical. And I remembered how freeing it was. A night out was going in the driveway with my neighbors or walking to the water for sunset. And I remember posting that, boy, I wish they would, extend this thing for several more months. But then the lockdown ended and we went right back to our other habits. But the one thing that changed was everything cost twice as much. And those prices never came down. And so it's interesting how I had a big restaurant habit before, but I'm trying to stay on top of that because that's a ripoff.
Yeah. Well, in fact, you should see. So I'm going to visit Fawn for tomorrow. I'm leaving. But we were talking. So we were talking earlier and planning, what we were going to do. And so part of our conversation was, Fawn goes, "What's our eating out budget?" So we literally went through our plans for the time, and we're like, "Oh, let's do we'll pack a picnic for that activity or whatever." And then we had like very intentional. Okay, I'm cooking breakfast because I always cook breakfast when I go steer because Fawn doesn't cook. I cook. So I'm going to cook breakfast.
I can make oatmeal.
But mine's better. And we've got, it is. So just admit it. And then we've got like packing the, picnics for certain things. And then it's like, okay, and on this day or whatever, we're going to go to this restaurant and, here's kind of the deal. But it's like, that's part of our planning instead of what you would traditionally do is just not
go to a restaurant.
Look back at your bill and go, man, I kind of spent a lot on that trip, but just being very intentional about how we're planning. And it's kind of fun for us to do that, right? Like those are just habit changes that kind of that support what you're saying.
I feel like I am pulling a scam whenever I go to my town has a boat club and I'm a member of it. And it's not a yacht club. It's just a beat up building where you have to be a member and you can use the bathroom. But it's got this deck that faces out at the Intercoastal. And on the other side is one of the popular restaurants in town. And they always have a good band on the weekends, like kind of music I like. So I always feel like it's a scam when I show up with food and a bottle of wine and I sit there and my evening out has cost me $5. I've got this great view and
music.
And we don't even think. And the thing that kills me the most about this is iced tea. Iced tea is my favorite thing about going out to a restaurant. But now they want between $3 and $4 for 2 cents worth of tea. And I'm a little angry about this, and I'm trying to not get it because that seems to be, for me, the reason I'm there is so somebody fills my tea up. But, I'm conscious of this now because who made it okay for a hamburger to cost $18?
Oh, gosh.
And they cost $18 everywhere now. Why is that? How much is a hamburger? I mean, if you're at home, we all know I don't cook. Michelle, how much is a hamburger to make? I mean, it's certainly no more than $3, right?
Yeah.
Right. How can they justify an $18 hamburger? And here we are, a bunch of slubs doing it. And I just wonder, and this is a good question for you, since you're the guest and we're talking too much. These kids, they just keep doing it. And I guess charging it, right? I mean, you talk about the plastic, but it's like, they got to have their Starbucks. They just go and they got to go skydiving and all this stuff.
Uber Eats. That's another thing they are.
Oh my gosh,
money on.
Well, yeah, and immediately they just order everything from Amazon immediately. It's just don't think. And so, are they? What do you know? I mean, are they really having habits that they're going to be paying off for years, or is this, I mean,
so first I have to
just have more resources.
I have to confess, I am addicted to Amazon.
We all are.
So it's interesting you mentioned this. I read an article just the other day about the new money habits of our generation that's coming up, Gen Z and the millennials, and how they are more focused on today than tomorrow. So you all may have heard the phrase YOLO, you only live once. Well, now research is showing that this next generation, they would much rather trade off the saving and the planning for the future so that they can have greater experiences today. My concern as a futurist, however, is I'm always future oriented in my thinking. My concern is absolutely, what does that trade-off look like when the generation gets older and when they're even closer to retirement age? And so the tricky thing is what's going to happen, in my opinion, is there will be no retirement. Everyone will essentially work until they're unable to work. And then we're going to have a mass population of people that will need financial support. The $1 million question is, where will that support come from? And who will provide it?
Well, because they're balking at paying my support, and I already paid into Social Security. And they're pissed off about that. But look, my money already went in there.
Right.
But you're right. Who is going to do that for them when they don't have anything socked away?
Yeah, 100%. And I don't want to speculate on different options, but I will tell you, in my own household, one of the lessons that I try to teach my children is I always say to them, you never know what's in my mind. So randomly, I will have something like a reward that they would want. And then I'll say to them, but you have to pay for it. So we'll be out and about and it's like, oh, it's a hot day. Oh, mommy wants ice cream. So let's go get ice cream. Everyone's excited. Ice cream is on the brain. When we get to the restaurant, I'll turn to them and say, you're going to pay for it. And they're like, wait, what? You wanted ice cream. What I'm trying to do is show them that the very thing that you want, you have to be prepared to get it when it becomes available.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you spent your money last week on candy or Uber Eats and you wasted the money, when mommy goes for ice cream and you want ice cream, you don't have the resources anymore because you spent it on things that did not matter. And so I'm really trying to make for my children this connection between what is valuable to you versus what is available to you. Uber Eats is available to you, but what's more valuable? Going on a family trip with your family and your cousins and being able to buy a souvenir, is that more valuable, or is having instant food right now more valuable? And so ideally, the lesson that they're going to learn is I don't need to focus so much on this immediate experience because a more valuable experience is waiting for me in the future.
You know, when you said that about your Amazon addiction, and I think that is a painful source of a money drain for most people. And I certainly had that. And this summer I went away for several months in my van with my dog and could not get an Amazon shipment. And I learned something. If I needed something, I could go to a store.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not ever once have that stress of the Amazon delivery person coming up the walk with a box that I didn't know what was in it. And you know you've done this. You're like, here comes that box. It's like, oh gosh, what the hell did I order? You have no idea.
No, this is
that
me.
Box. Oh, you know what it is?
Because Brandy knows where every dollar goes. So
I know exactly where it is. Well, I know exactly what it is.
I know that my experience is not unique to me, that many people have, they order. And plus you get it in your brain. I need that. Oh, I need that. So let me get it now. Instead of waiting a while and say, well, maybe I can get by without it. So I came back. So I've been back for more than 2 months. And I've ordered 3 things from Amazon just because I knew I'd get a better selection of what I wanted. But everything else, I go to the store so I don't get that dopamine hit from ordering something. It's like, oh, I'm going to get a present, right? It's like, oh, I need bug spray. I will get that when I'm in the store next time. So it's just, here's my bug spray. Instead, because I think when you hit that button, it makes you want to hit it again. And again.
Here's the thing. Go ahead, Michelle.
I was going to say, I have a friend that she will put stuff in the cart and save to see, let's wait a couple of days. Do I actually still need this or want this? And it's a good way to kind of keep it.
That's exactly what I was going to say. And yeah, I was totally going to say, and Amazon has these lists. So I create lists, one for me, one for the girls, random things. And it's like when I'm needing that addictive feeling, it's easier to pop it onto a list with the, oh, I'll go back to it. And it kind of tricks my brain into thinking that I've bought something.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's smart.
Cool. Yeah. Well, you should see if we went through my cart on Save for Later. It's like,
oh yeah, the Save for Later
long.
too.
It's like,
that's a good one.
Miles.
But another thing, I've had a client who was like full on, Brandy, I want help with this Amazon addiction. It was just destroying her budget. And what we collectively agreed is she would uninstall the app from her phone. And you know how Amazon requires you to have a debit card attached? She would detach the debit card or the credit card so that when she went to try to make, she had to type it in. And that little bit of
friction.
It caused her to pause. Like, wait, what am I doing? Why am I doing this?
Do you know what I think would cure my addiction? Well, my addiction is pretty close to being cured on that, but it would have sooner get rid of Prime. Because, right?
Because you had to think about shipping.
Right, because Prime means, oh, here comes that nice truck bringing me what I just ordered this morning, and I didn't have to leave my house. That's wonderful. Let me get something else for tomorrow. And whereas if you had to pay for that service, you might think, hey, so because we're far in, we're definitely going to have you back on the show because we love you. But what would you say if you were sitting somebody down and said, what are the most important things you can do for your financial security if you have not been paying attention to it?
The first thing is stop spending. Just take a little bit of a 30-day spending detox outside of essentials. So when I'm working with clients, the first thing we do is we identify, where is your money going? Most people don't even know where it's going. So take a look at the bank statement. You can still get a bank statement from your bank these days. It's not printed, it's digital, PDF. Take a look at the bank statement. Get an idea of what happened last month so you can make a plan for what you want to happen the next month. The other thing is, try to position, especially like Michelle said earlier, if you're a successful woman and you're not really worrying about, there are real people worrying about real day-to-day, am I going to be able to eat? That's not most of us. So if you're on the other side of this coin and you're like, okay, my basic needs, my Maslow's hierarchy of needs are already met, this is the extra money that I should do wise things with, I suggest you immediately figure out, how can I cut my expenses so that I am saving more than I am spending? So let's just say, for easy math, if I look at, I'm making $100 and I realize that all of my lifestyle is costing me $75. That's 75% of what I bring home. That's a little high. So how can I reduce that so that, okay, today I'm spending 75%. Maybe over the next 3 months, I want to reduce that to 60%. Start having smaller graduated goals that you can work toward so that you then realize, you know what? I started off here spending 75% of my income to cover my lifestyle, but I'm still enjoying the same similar lifestyle, but at 60%. Now that difference of 15%, I can do something radical with it. I can invest it in the stock market. I can invest it in real estate. I can invest it in day trading. Now I have an opportunity to fund wealth generation.
That is
your faces, you guys. It just blew me away.
Oh, I know. I love hearing you. You just, so did you write a book? Did you say?
I did. So
well,
I wrote this.
Where is it?
No, what is it?
Is it this one? Is it this one?
Yes.
But look what Michelle's green screen's doing to that.
I know. I need to take it. I'll take off my green screen.
But yeah, it's called The Story of Three Little Divas. Reach your money goals in 3 steps before you huff, and blow your next paycheck away.
I actually gave this to my entire team. Brandy spoke. I did. I gave it to my entire team, and they it was like a group activity because it's like this is like the easiest workbook. It's so easy.
And I'm updating it, Michelle, to include some of the foresight stuff that I learned in my doctorate program. So yeah, I'm excited.
Well, you're such a rock star. So where can people order that?
Well, just because it's
from Amazon, right?
Yeah, right. But just because it's kind of interesting, she does it that their elder passes away and has basically 3 people she divvies up the inheritance to, and it's the personality types and what they do with that inheritance, and it kind of helps you relate to who do I relate to in this habits and beliefs, and then how to wherever you're starting from, then how do you help to do some course correct it.
So where do we get it?
References.
You can find it at the3littledivas.com if you would like a signed copy, or you can obviously order it from Amazon.
If you've got
Although the Amazon copy will not be signed.
Much signed.
And is your website
going.
The Three Little Divas or Brandy Baxter, or where do they find you?
All of the above. So at the3littledivas.com is the book site, or brandybaxter.com is my personal site.
And people would hire you for what?
So I am a consultant, so they would hire me for, like you said at the beginning, how are these modern trends going to impact my business or my personal finances, and what should I do about it? So I work with organizations and individuals.
Well, sorry, I just want to say, can we just acknowledge again, Brandy is a veteran and she's married to a vet, and just thank you for your service, because you've also done so much to help veterans that are coming back into the workforce and being able to become more independent. And you just do a ton of work. And also, like I said earlier, just the faith base. So I love the sparkle you sprinkle everywhere.
I love your energy. Yeah. How about the summary, Michelle?
All right. So there was a few major takeaways I had. And, and again, I'm going to say something else. But for the record, I've known Brandy for a while. And so I'm so happy to have her here because she makes it so attainable and relatable, and it doesn't feel intimidating. And I value that so much. I don't feel afraid. I mean, I have been very open with Brandy because I just trust and feel comfortable that she's like there to help me. But thank you for just the comment about giving yourself grace. If you have, as a woman, been a victim of, because you didn't have your eyes on the ball, that you had a lot of loss. And I think that I know for myself, I needed to hear that. I loved your suggestion about taking money dates, whether it's with yourself or alone, because again, that's going back to the point that you made earlier around you need to decide about where every dollar goes, and you do that proactively. And so those money dates give you an opportunity to A, set your intention and put together your system and process, and B, give you a point to say, how did I do over the past month in adhering to what I put down as my goals? And for those of us who are ambitious, successful women, we operate in that mindset. So it's a great way for us to transition how we get work done into something that has traditionally been very, very uncomfortable. And that's our financial independence and health. And then I like the advice about don't feel so rushed just to get an advisor. Find out who you want to work with, base it on their results and outcomes, and not just because they're the first ones that showed up or your sister-in-law uses them. I mean, make sure that you're agreeing to go into business with someone who is stacking the odds in your favor to actually have better outcomes. Awesome conversation today. We can totally keep going.
So we want you to come back, and thank you so much for your time. I'm sure all of us have something to think about, and we have to figure out how we're going to act on it. So everybody, just remember brandybaxter.com, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Von Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.